Chapter 3. When Sig woke up, he looked around. The others were still resting, except for Row 82, who was nowhere to be seen. He yawned and stretched. He felt refreshed and rested. He smiled widely as he got to his feet. The sight of green grass, blue sky, and white puffy clouds floating by with a gentle breeze was especially soothing, since the last thing he remembered was holding his heavenly shield in the pit of a crater. His joints and muscles felt especially sore as he got to his feet. Although this was not a new sensation, he made sure he went slowly. At last he got up and surveyed the rolling hills and tall grass all around them, and the snow-covered mountains in the distance. He laughed slightly at the sight of snow in the sunshine. He had wondered whether he would ever see that again. His laughter had been louder than he thought, and Lucas stirred. "Sig?" said Lucas as he sat up and rubbed his eyes. "Sorry to wake you, Lucas," said Sig with a smile. "You're fine," replied Lucas as he got up. "I didn't want to sleep too long anyway." Lucas got to his feet and looked around. "Where's Row 82? asked Lucas. "I don't know," said Sig. "He didn't tell you?" "No," said Lucas. "Well, I'll wander around for a bit then," said Sig. "You stay here with the others." Lucas did not like it, but nodded in acknowledgement. "Fine," he said. Sig smiled and began walking out into the surrounding hills. Though he was not expecting any hostility, he kept his weapons easily accessible. After almost an hour of searching, he came to a dirt road. Sig looked at it carefully. While he had seen hundreds of dirt roads in his time, they were typically covered with chunks of asphalt, broken glass, and rusting metal. This road had none of these things. He continued walking down the road and was surprised by the lack of tire tracks anywhere. Instead, there were ruts from much narrower wheels in various places. Eventually, a faint noise caught his attention. It seemed to be a repetitive clapping sound that was approaching. He moved off the road and ducked in the grass. Slowly, the sound grew louder, and finally, Sig was able to make out a horse-drawn wagon approaching. "What the?" whispered Sig. There were very few large animals in his time, especially since there was so little food, but even in the Golden Age there had been automobiles and paved roads. Sig was not sure whether he was seeing the exception or the rule. To his surprise, the carriage began slowing down as it approached him. He wondered if he had been seen. He remained still and kept a hand on his pistol to be safe. "Mr. West?" came a soft feminine voice. "Are you here yet?" Sig's eyes grew wide, but he determined that whoever was calling his name could not possibly be calling him. "Mr. Siegfried West?" repeated the voice. The carriage came to a stop, and a woman in a long dress wrapped the reins of the horse around a post on the carriage and stood up to get a better view. She had long, wavy brown hair and brown eyes. She was slender and tall, and Sig immediately thought she was quite beautiful. This, of course, made him even more cautious, and he gripped the handle of his pistol tightly. "Mr. Siegfried West," she called louder, "do not hide yourself from me. I know you are here, and I know you are from the age of the Destroyer." Sig could no longer keep himself hidden. He drew his weapon, stood up, and pointed it at her. "Who are you?" demanded Sig. The woman gasped and jumped back. Sig decided that she did not appear to be armed, and gradually holstered his handgun. "I'm sorry to frighten you, but I want to know how you would be aware of me, or of the Destroyer," said Sig. "I thought you were supposed to be the friendly one," whimpered the woman. Sig paused and thought about what she said, then burst out laughing. "Really?" he asked. His laughter caught her off guard again, but after a few moments she became convinced that he had only been taken off guard by her knowledge of the future. She stood up straight and fixed her dress. "My name is Chloe Baldwin," she said. "I used to be the bearer of the key of prophecy, but I relinquished it in the proper time so that it will be discovered by the next key bearer." Sig's eyes grew wide. Well, Chloe, said Sig with a smile. His use of her first name seemed presumptuous at first, but she remembered that he was not from her time. You have me at a disadvantage. I know very little about this time. We came here as an escape, actually. Miss Baldwin, if you please, sir, said Chloe softly, and I am aware of the circumstances behind your arrival. Her formality made Sig smile widely. What can I do for you, Miss Baldwin? Asked Sig. You were obviously waiting for me. I want your help investigating what happened with Miss Patterson, said Chloe. Sig gave her a blank stare. After a few moments, he spoke up. Is that a name I should know? Asked Sig. I thought that you would understand the history of the divine keys coming from the future, Mr. West, said Chloe in a disappointed tone. She was the bearer of the key of origins. Miss Baldwin, said Sig with a smile, I thought you would understand the impact of the destroyer if you could see the future. Chloe scowled at him in frustration. Sig laughed loudly, which upset her even more. Mr. West, this is not a laughing matter, said Chloe. Sig stopped laughing and his face grew solemn. Miss Baldwin, he said in a low voice. The sudden sincerity in his tone took her breath away. I'm sure that whatever you've got to tell me is important, but I just woke up and found out that I was alive, even though I should be dead. So I'm going to laugh as much as I please. Chloe cleared her throat. Of course, Mr. West, she said as she lowered her head. She realized that when she had seen him in visions of the future and noticed his wide smile, she had only assumed that he was the easygoing one in the group. Now she folded her arms and raised an eyebrow as she tried to make sense of the large man. Sig laughed again. Well, I don't want to give you the impression that I'm unwilling to help, said Sig, and I am certain my companions will feel the same. Why don't you park your vehicle and come with me? I suppose this road is not used often enough to worry about the carriage, said Chloe hesitantly. How far away are the others? Oh, not far, in that direction, said Sig as he pointed to the hill from where he had walked. Will you help me down, Mr. West? Asked Chloe as she reached out her hand. Sig gave her a confused look, but extended his hand. She leaned on him as she stepped down. Sig smiled and shook his head as she brushed herself off. Very well, Mr. West, said Chloe as she put her arm inside Sig's. Lead the way. Sig laughed loudly. Chloe felt slightly offended that he was laughing at everything she was doing, but she kept her feelings to herself. You were the exact opposite of Kirana, said Sig. This is going to be entertaining. Chloe had seen Kirana Sepharvaim in visions, and she had come to a similar conclusion. Kirana was no lady. She had been surprised to learn that a woman could wield the heavenly sword. She thought it was bad enough that Savannah lions held the heavenly shield. Chloe hoped that their cultural differences would not interfere with her efforts to learn the truth about why Jennifer had fled and what had actually happened to Molly Patterson. The walk in the tall grass was difficult in her dress, but Chloe did her best to pretend that she was exerting no extra effort to maintain her pace. She looked up at Sig, who had a genuine smile on his face. Notwithstanding his previous demeanor and how unkempt he appeared, he had a ruggedness that appealed to her. She looked away, determined to chase any thoughts of attraction from her mind. Eventually, they arrived near the others. Most of them were still asleep, but to Chloe's disappointment, Kirana was awake. Got yourself a girlfriend, Sig? Asked Kirana with a smirk. I beg your pardon? Exclaimed Chloe. Sig laughed loudly. Chloe pulled her arm free of Sig's and gave him a disapproving look. Guess not, said Kirana with a smile. Sig laughed again. Chloe's face turned red. I take it that you are Miss Sepharvaim, asked Chloe as she adjusted her dress nervously. Miss Sepharvaim? Asked Kirana with a laugh. Who are you? Chloe turned to Sig and nodded as if prompting him. Sig smiled and whispered loudly. That means she wants to know your name, he said. Chloe sighed loudly and shook her head in frustration. Fine, I'll introduce myself, she said as she turned to Kirana. I am Miss Chloe Baldwin. Until recently, I was the bearer of the Key of Prophecy. Did you lose it? Chided Kirana. Sig laughed. No, said Chloe angrily. What is wrong with you people? She looked at the others that were still resting, wondering if any of them had any sense of what was proper. Suddenly she noticed Jennifer Cedar and gasped. Jennifer, she whispered. Jennifer stirred at the sound of her name and looked around. Suddenly she saw Chloe and sat up. Chloe, she said. What are you doing? Whispered Chloe. What are you doing? Replied Jennifer. You two know each other, I take it? Asked Sig. Chloe and Jennifer seemed to ignore the others. Jennifer got to her feet. I thought you had given up on the council. You were going to give up your key to the Pratt family, said Jennifer. I did, said Chloe, and I thought that you were going to check up on Molly before she turned up dead. Well, I thought everyone was leaving, said Jennifer. Savannah and Lincoln went off together. Alexis started traveling the world. Samuel Godwinson and Ethan McCarthy went to work in a hospital, and Levi Crawford became one of their patients. Really? Asked Chloe. Mr. Crawford was that far off? Really, said Jennifer. All the more reason we need to find out exactly what happened with Miss Patterson, said Chloe resolutely. Why did you give up your key, then? Asked Jennifer. I was supposed to, replied Chloe. My key told me so. Also, I don't need to predict the future. I need to find out what happened in the past. The last prophecy I received was that Mr. West would come with the Guardians from the Age of the Destroyer. All right, Chloe, said Jennifer. In exchange for food and lodging, we will assist. Chloe smiled. That is most agreeable, exclaimed Chloe. Jennifer smiled at her enthusiasm. Slowly the others that had been sleeping got up. We have company? Asked Lucas as he rubbed his eyes. Where's row 82? Asked Jonathan. I bet he never has to ask that about us, said Lizard as he tilted his head, pondering the limits of row 82's perception. Jennifer? Whispered Victor as he sat up. Chloe's eyes grew wide as she realized that Victor had been there the entire time. She turned to Jennifer to silently ask about him. She mouthed the word later, which, while frustrating to Chloe, earned a nod and silence on the matter. Who is this? Asked Lizard as he teleported behind her. Chloe turned to Jennifer to allow her to make the introduction, but to her surprise, Lucas spoke up. Her name is Chloe Baldwin, said Lucas. She was the bearer of the Key of Prophecy. Miss Chloe Baldwin, if you please, young man, corrected Chloe. Was? Asked Jonathan. At this point she has already given it to Jeremiah Pratt, said Lucas. Chloe raised an eyebrow. How did you know that, young man? Asked Chloe. Having the Key of Origins never gave Miss Patterson that much insight. True enough, said Lucas as he stood and stretched. Conversations with Aaron Pratt are surprisingly informative, though. So it worked out? Asked Chloe with a sense of relief. Did you not think that it would? Asked Lucas with a hint of surprise. Well, I mean, stammered Chloe, with Miss Patterson and all, I just... She stopped and tilted her head. What do you mean speaking to me like that? What do you mean speaking to Lucas like that? Asked Lizard with air quotes. Well, I suppose it does not matter, said Chloe with an irritated sigh. If there is no immediate need, we can go to my estate. The others looked at one another. Sig laughed loudly. Row 82 can catch up, he said. He will know where we are. The others seemed to think this made sense and slowly got up. Chloe led them toward her carriage. It was not long before they arrived. Chloe suddenly stopped and pulled a small revolver out of her sleeve. She pointed to the carriage and fired, startling the others. They saw a black-robed man struggle to get out of the carriage and stumble on the ground. It's one of Felix's, said Lizard angrily. He teleported over to him and tore the black key from about his neck. No, objected the demon worshipper. What do you think you are doing? Demanded Lizard with air quotes. The demon worshipper slipped out of consciousness before he could respond. Nice shot, said Sig with a wide smile. Chloe smiled in return at the compliment. Help me up? She asked as she put out her hand. Sig grinned as he helped her take the reins. I'm sorry that there isn't room for all of you inside, said Chloe. Maybe the women and the young man would like to ride so the journey is less of a toll on them. Am I unable to walk? Muttered Lucas with a frown. You can take your ride and... started Kirana. We're fine walking, interrupted Jennifer with a smile. Very well, said Chloe cheerfully. After traveling several miles, they came to a large home that sat on top of a small hill. Except for Jennifer, they were impressed by the size of the large building. It was made of cut stone and was 3 stories tall. Chloe had Sig help her down before she led everyone up to the massive, ornate hardwood doors. She pulled on the large handle, and the door swung open. Please come in, said Chloe. Slowly they made their way inside the building. After closing the door behind them, she guided them toward a lounge with plush furniture. Stephanie's eyes widened as they went in, and she grabbed Lizard's arm. What? Asked Lizard. What's wrong? She's worried about us, answered a cloaked man that rushed up from behind with a gun pointed at him. He was followed by several others who held guns to the heads of several maids. Their dresses were splattered with blood, and mascara had run down their faces. They were shaking with fear. Nobody move, shouted the demon worshipper. It would be a shame if something happened to one of these innocent women. What have you done with the men? Demanded Chloe angrily. They tried to be noble, said the demon worshipper. Though his face was hidden behind the hood of his gray cloak, it was clear that he was smiling. You picked the wrong house, said Lizard with air quotes. Stephanie's eyes grew wide, but he teleported behind the demon worshipper before she could stop him. The demon worshipper anticipated his movement, and as soon as he appeared, he swung a knife and stabbed Lizard in the gut. We knew you would say that, said the demon worshipper as he yanked his blade free.